Wow. You can tell this is a 2018 Seagrass conference because we've got a lot of fragmentation going on. You might want to translocate yourselves to somewhere more central. Strap yourselves in because not everyone likes doing the last talk of the day on the conference, but I do because afterwards, let's face it, you've got nothing better to do, so I can talk for as long as I like. Tim's nodding. So over the next hour or two, I'm going to tell you about one of my all-time favourite projects that I've been involved in, and it's an all-time favourite project for a couple of reasons. One is partly because it's been with some particularly excellent people, including Gary No Questions and Adriana and their teams, but also a group of very excellent ecologists who don't consider themselves ecologists. They are the custodians of the saltwater country that is the Bardi-Jawi country, and they're up there, the Bardi-Jawi ranges. Also because it's an awesome place. It's really a magnificent place. Where is it? I'm talking about the Kimberley. So there you are. I've asterisked it for you. You know where it is. The Kimberley is in northwestern Australia. To give you a rough context, the Kimberley is a region in the state of Western Australia. It's approximately 600 times bigger than the country of Singapore. But what I've been looking at is, with the team, is just a few sites at a place called the Buccaneer Archipelago, One Arm Point, in Bardi-Jawi country. This is a really interesting part of the world. It's a challenging part of the world. It has some pretty extreme tidal ranges. So during the spring tides, we get 9 to 10 metres of tidal range. That makes it fun. It's also unique because the seagrass, or the seagrass that we're studying in this particular part of the project, lives in these kind of perched lagoons. So there's these lagoons which have a calcium carbonate structure, and as the tide goes out, the calcium carbonate structure is left intact, and the seagrasses themselves are sitting there perched at about 4 metres above low tide, but they're sitting in about knee to thigh level. We did look at growth, or with Gary's team. I did practice my talk and also took it out because it was going to be too long, but the punchline is, in terms of growth rates, these seagrasses are smashing. They're Olympic level growth rates. So Thalassia, this is shoot level growth rate, so we're pulling all our leaves right, Gary. So Thalassia, it's more than a centimetre total growth per shoot per day, and there's 2-3 leaves in the shoot. For Enhalus, which is the other main meadow forming species in the lagoons, it's you've got 3 or 4 leaves in a shoot. You combine them all and you're getting about 21 millimetres. I'll come back to that later because that's important, but these are high growth rates we're talking about. So high growth rates, I was interested in asking how much of that was getting eaten. There's a few potential contenders in terms of the herbivores in that part of the world. So I do these experiments called tethering experiments, where Adriana mentioned them later. You get a piece of seagrass, an intact piece of seagrass that hasn't been bitten, like the one on the left, and you take a photo of it, you scan it, you measure it, you peg it out using a bit of laundry materials. There's some clothes pegs and some sisals, or hemp rope, and then you take it back. So the reason I'm on my own in that particular photo, because all the team thought it was really way too much like doing laundry, and whenever I was doing this, they just found something far more interesting to do, which I was okay with as long as they were keeping an eye out for the crocodiles. When I did my postdoc in the Florida Keys, I would put the seagrass out, go back 24 hours later, pick it up, and it would look something like that. You'd get a couple of bites. In the Kimberley, put the seagrass out and look something like that. There's a bit of Thalassia for you. And I come back 24 hours later and it would look something like that. And no, there's not something wrong with your eyes. There's nothing left. It's been eaten. So how important is herbivory? Well, here, take the growth rates. So remember, we're talking about some pretty massive growth rates. And take the consumption rates and calculate a potential net consumption. This is not an absolute consumption. It's a tethering experiment, but you're measuring what potentially could be consumed as a potential, as a proportion of production. We got some absolutely stupid results. So 3 places, which we did 3 different times, and each mission, each trip, we did on 3 different days. And in some places, we were getting more than 1,000% of daily production getting eaten. But even if we discount some of the stupid numbers and just focus on what's in the middle, the results for Thalassia were pretty compelling. So potential herbivory was much more than growth. How is this possible? Well, it's only, again, it's potential herbivory. Basically, you saw the photo a little earlier. What's there in terms of the Thalassia, there's very little left. It's being grazed down to a nub. Enhalus, slightly different story again. 3 different places, 3 different field trips, a couple of days on each trip. About half the time we put it out, it wasn't getting consumed at all. The other half of the time we were putting it out, it was getting consumed. Sort of, on average, if you like, consumption is either, or potential consumption, potential herbivory, is either roughly equal to production, or it's a bit less. And the fact that, you know, when we're looking for leaves of Enhalus for the tethering, a lot of them have eroding tips, and that's kind of a qualitative indicator that the potential, the absolute herbivory, is not 100% on Enhalus, because it is growing, it is filling the water column at that low tide. So then we wanted to know, well, what is doing this? So herein come our excellent Bardi Jawi rangers. And walking around the lagoon systems with them, just shooting the breeze and having a chat, thought about there's a few potential contenders. There's some seagrass. There's some seagrass inhabiting fish that are there. They said, well, you know, they're probably eating the seaweed off the rocks. Anyway, I said, well, let's have a look. So here's Trevor with his throwing spear. I said, get me a rabbitfish, Trevor. And so he got me a rabbitfish and cut it open, had a look, and inside it was chock full of seagrass. So, all right, that's the next bit of our study. So we systematically went out and collected this particular species. I should say we shot a couple of different species of fish. The Siganus, lineatus, the golden line rabbitfish was the only one that we found the seagrass in the stomach of. So we went to the same 3 places, the same trips, and I got so each of these pie charts is 30 or so individual fish. And you see the pattern there. The green is the seagrass, and in this case the seagrass is almost exclusively Thalassia. And even the blue-green that you see there is a blue-green alga, which was growing as an epiphyte on the Enhalus in this case. So the rabbitfish are there in some abundance, and they are eating a lot of seagrass. There's also a nice link to the Bardi Jawi, because the rabbitfish story is that rabbitfish are one of their preferred food sources in the cold season. So they have a kind of a seasonal pattern in fatness. In the cold season, they get quite a layer of fat in their gut, and that's when the Bardi Jawi really prize them for that fat. So they're out there with throwing spears and with spear guns, and they're catching them, and they are a really prized food item. There's another one, also a prized food item by the Bardi Jawi, but what we did was we were out on boats, and at low tide there's no turtles in these seagrass meadows, but as the tide's rising, you can see the green turtles coming in. So what we did was, you can see tag got about a dozen or so green turtles over the course of the study, put some satellite trackers on, and we wanted to know their association with seagrasses, kind of an inference as to, you know, whether these were seagrass eating turtles. So on our map, there's the green areas are where the seagrass meadows are. The red dots are where the turtles' locations were from the fast lock, the satellite transmissions. So I've got about a dozen or so of these, but I'll only show you two. But basically, the punchline is, in low tide, the turtles are hanging around the islands in the deep water. At high tide, as the water's coming in, they move onto the seagrass meadows. So all these turtles, most of the turtles, are hanging around the seagrass meadows. So, you know, what does an ecologist do? He wants to do some stable isotope work to confirm that these are eating and assimilating the seagrass. So with turtles, it was fairly easy. We catch the turtles, we restrain them, we poke them in the neck with a needle, we release them, and they swim away more or less unharmed. With the rabbitfish, it's possibly slightly more traumatic for them. We poke them in the head with a spear gun, and they don't tend to swim away quite so well after that. But we can eat them, so that's a good thing. Here's so this is stable isotope modelling. I could, of course, regale you for hours about my Mortal Kombat with CSIRO software, but this is just to sort of summarise the plot, I guess. These, what are these? These are box plots that show the percentiles of the model output. So we collect our primary producers, we feed it into the model, and the model says, based on the information that you gave me, this is what is the probable diet of that species. So rabbitfish, white mussel, basically it is probably eating a bit of seaweed, but almost all of its nutrition is coming from seaweed, and again, this is using Thalassia as the input to the model. Thalassia and Enhalus in this part of the world do have a slight difference in their carbon isotope ratio, and we were able to use that to pull them apart a bit, but essentially it's Thalassia. Turtles, a similar story. Again, box plots, percentiles, but here, not worrying so much about the epiphytes, just looking at seaweed versus seagrass, and on average, the green turtles, according to the model, are really assimilating mostly seagrass nutrition. But there's kind of an interesting wrinkle in that tale. In this part of the world, as I mentioned, turtles are food. This is an ancient culture living in a postmodern world, I guess. So there's lots of questions that could pop up. I had my own, and Rohan might ask whether a turtle is still a dialectic turtle if it's on your plate. But I was interested in finding out whether I could find some additional evidence of whether these turtles were eating the seagrass. So I hung around the landing beach and I spoke to the hunters, and I got 5 stomachs. It's not a very big sample size, but hang in with me. So of the 5 stomachs, 3 stomachs were absolutely chock full of seagrass, and it was all Thalassia. 2 of the stomachs had no seagrass, but had seaweed. So the data that I haven't showed you, because it's quite long and complicated and there's a talk for another day, is if we go back to the stable isotope data and we model this, we actually find out that the turtles are a bimodal distribution in carbon. So what seems to be happening is that there's a group of turtles that are seaweed-eating turtles. There's a group of turtles that are seagrass-eating turtles. The bulk of them are seagrass-eating turtles. But they seem to be, and this remains to be kind of decided definitively because there's still a bit of ambiguity, they seem to be one or the other. They're not both. Right, summary. So, seagrass is growing fast. It's Olympic level rates of growth. It's growing fast, and it's growing continuously fast all year round. But consumption is accounting for pretty much all of that. Certainly in terms of Thalassia, consumption is potentially accounting for as much seagrass as you can chuck at it. The rabbitfish and the turtles are just eating it. In terms of Enhalus, It's getting eaten less, but it is still getting eaten. The two major consumers in this particular system are the rabbitfish, the goldline rabbitfish, Siganus, lineatus, and they are mostly eating Thalassia, and then the green turtles, which are either eating seaweed or eating seagrass, but probably not both. And the punchline is that herbivory, unlike some other parts of the world, herbivory is the primary fate of primary production in this part of the world. A few acknowledgements, especially to the traditional owners of Bari Jawi country who allowed us to go and do this work, to more of the team and the students, and also to the pilling station, which allowed us to do the work. So we can talk about that later. How am I going for time? It felt like that actually took less than an hour.
Yeah, no, you get right on.
Yeah.